All right, joining us now on the line is Republican presidential candidate, Senator Ted Cruz of Texas. And Senator Cruz, thanks for being with us. And have your ears stopped burning from all your colleagues talking about you without mentioning your name yesterday?
Well, Howie, it's great to be with you, and these are interesting times. I think we're facing extraordinary threats, and there's a need simply for leaders to tell the truth. What I've endeavored to do every day in the Senate is do exactly that: stand up and tell the truth, and do what I said I would do. And in the past several days, that has been particularly unwelcome because Republican leadership has joined with Democratic leadership in stopping conservative bills and in pushing forward corporate welfare and cronyism. And when that is occurring, the truth is highly unwelcome in the United States Congress.
You know, I remember reading about a year or so ago, I may have even mentioned this to you when you've been on the show before, a story in the front page of the New York Times, and it said that Senator Ted Cruz, a freshman from Texas, is the most unpopular senator with his elder colleagues, et cetera, et cetera. And I thought to myself, man, you can't buy that kind of ink. I mean, I thought that was the best endorsement you could ever get. And now they're going after you again, and every time one of them steps to the plate, you go up in the polls in New Hampshire and Iowa.
Well, it's a simple dynamic, and it's important to underscore. In my entire time in the Senate, I have never spoke ill. I've never personally attacked any member of the Senate, Republican or Democrat. I've never raised my voice or engaged in ad hominem attacks. What I have done is spoken the truth about what's occurring. And, as you know, Howie, people are frustrated. We were told in 2010, if only we had a Republican House of Representatives, things would be different. We came out in incredible numbers. We voted for it. We got a Republican House, and they didn't do a darn thing. We were told if only we had a Republican Senate. The problem is Harry Reid. In 2014, millions of Americans came out. We won an historic victory, retired Harry Reid. What has the Republican Senate done? The very first thing it did is came back and passed a $1 trillion cromnibus plan filled with corporate pork and welfare and cronyism. Then the Republican majority voted to fund Obamacare, to fund President Obama's executive amnesty. And then Republican leadership jammed through the confirmation of Loretta Lynch as Attorney General. Every one of those is identical to what Harry Reid and the Democrats would have done, and people are understandably frustrated.
I want you to explain what happened with you and Mike Lee, but let me try to explain it because I don't want to get into the weeds of inside baseball and all that kind of stuff. And just correct me if I'm wrong, but you can add certain amendments, but only a certain number of amendments. So the leader, Mitch McConnell, ruled that the amendment on defunding Planned Parenthood was quote unquote not germane. Then he ruled that an amendment dealing with sanctuary cities, resulting from Kate Steinle in San Francisco, that was not germane. But then when we come up to crony capitalism here, which we're about to talk about, the ExportImport Bank, he ruled that was germane to the legislation. So in other words, the things that directly affect Americans were not germane, but what directly affects his constituency of lobbyists and crony capitalists was germane. Is that an accurate description of it?
That's all essentially right, but it's even in many ways worse than that. So we're considering the highway bill, and Harry Reid for years abused his position as majority leader by using a parliamentary tool called filling the tree. Basically, he'd file every amendment that was possible to file, which would shut down anyone else being offered amendments.
And because he's the leader, he has first dibs.
Right.
Basically.
He gets to go first. And Republicans and Mitch McConnell for years decried Reid's abuse of power. Well, now the Republican leader is doing the exact same thing, filling the tree. And so he's the one who introduced the amendment. to reauthorize the Export-Import Bank, which is a classic example of corporate welfare.
By the way, Senator, let me just interrupt you there. I want to play a cut. This is from Barack Obama. This is from Barack Obama in 2008, talking about the Export-Import Bank. Let's play it. It's just very brief. Cut number 14, Sandy.
And now listen, I'm not a Democrat who believes that we can or should defend every government program just because it's there. You know, like waste, the Economic Development Agency and the Export-Import Bank that's become little more than a fund for corporate welfare.
See, so this is not a Tea Party attack on the bank. I mean, everybody has at one point or another agreed what it is, correct?
Correct, and in that I'm going to say a sentence that I rarely say, which is I agree emphatically with Barack Obama. Although it's interesting, do you know who doesn't agree with then Senator Barack Obama?
Who?
President Barack Obama. Now as president, suddenly he supports the corporate welfare. It's interesting, the junior senator, I guess now the senior senator from Massachusetts, Elizabeth Warren, who gives lots of speeches about standing up to big business, that gives lots of speeches about being a populist.
Yes.
Senator Warren supports the corporate welfare of the Export-Import Bank. There is a bipartisan corruption in Washington where I've said many times the biggest divide we've got in this country, it's not between Democrats and Republicans. The biggest divide politically is between career politicians in both parties and the American people. And what happens, we see what I call the Washington cartel, which is Washington politicians who get in bed with special interest and giant corporations, and they just grow government. It becomes the party of Washington. So the Republican leader, Mitch McConnell, agrees with the same priorities as the Democratic leader, Harry Reid. Indeed, I've referred to it as the McConnell-Reid leadership team. They're fighting for the same things. But then the Republican leader, not only did he bring up and force through this corporate welfare that all the lobbyists are writing checks to push forward, but Republican leadership stood up and led the effort to block a vote to defund Planned Parenthood, to block a vote to stop Iran sanctions from being lifted unless Iran recognizes Israel's right to exist as a Jewish state, unless Iran releases our hostages, to block a vote on stopping sanctuary cities, to block a vote on ending the congressional exemption from Obamacare, to block a vote on Cates Law. Those are the priorities of the American people, but the Washington cartel isn't listening to them. They're listening to the lobbyists.
They seem more concerned. Do you acknowledge that you called McConnell a liar on Friday?
Well, what I did on Friday, I gave a highly unusual floor speech. It's unlike one I've ever given, in which I stood up and simply described what had occurred, which is a couple of months ago, back in May, during the debate over Trade Promotion Authority, TPA. It appeared that McConnell had cut a deal to reauthorize the Export-Import Bank. And at our Senate Republican lunch that week, I asked him very directly, I said, what was the deal? What deal did you cut? And he was visibly angry that I asked him that. And 3 times he repeated, there is no deal, there is no deal, there is no deal. And I trusted him. I believed him. In fact, I went back to my office, Howie, and my staff told me, they said, Senator, he's not telling the truth. He is lying to you. And I said, listen, how can I accuse the majority leader? He looks me in the eyes in front of every Republican senator. I have to take him at his word. Well, then on Friday of this week, when McConnell called up the Export-Import Bank, filled the tree, and did what's called filed cloture, basically rammed it through using the full power of the majority leader, it was directly contrary to what he had told me and every other Republican senator 2 months earlier. And so what I did is I stood up and just said that. I said, here's the promise he made. Here's what he said to me, and his conduct today is directly.
So you did attack him. I don't have a problem with you attacking him, but you said you don't attack other senators.
But there is a difference. So let me tell you my view, and it's Reagan's 11th commandment, which is "Thou shalt not speak ill of other Republicans. I do not believe we should engage in personal attacks, that we should get down and dirty with nasty personal attacks. So, for example, in the 2016 presidential campaign, there have been more than a few other candidates who've thrown rocks my direction. In the Senate, there have been more than a few folks who've thrown rocks my direction.
By the way, do you want to throw a rock at Donald Trump?
I don't. I do not respond in kind. Donald Trump is a friend of mine. I have consistently praised him. And I do not reciprocate. Even when others attack me, I don't reciprocate. Reagan didn't either. He didn't engage in personal attacks. But the 11th commandment doesn't mean that you never disagree with another Republican on policy, on substance, on record. Remember, Ronald Reagan primaried Gerald Ford in '76.
Right.
But he didn't attack him and say he's a no good, unethical person. He said we need to stand for principle. So what I said about McConnell wasn't attacking him personally. Mm-hmm. It was simply talking about his record. He said this. He made this commitment to me, and then he broke it. And it was laying out the facts, and it was very calm and orderly, just walking through, telling the truth. You know, there's an old quote that is often wrongly attributed to George Orwell, but it's a powerful quote, which is, in a time of universal deception, telling the truth can be a revolutionary act.
Who said that? Who said it if it wasn't Orwell?
You know, it's not clear who said it. You find it online wrongly attributed to Orwell. Orwell didn't say it, and we don't know who did.
Let me play the cut for you from Orrin Hatch attacking you and get your response to it. He's the senior Republican, as you know, in the Senate. Cut number 15, Sandy.
Courtesy and decorum foster an atmosphere where we can work in good faith to find common ground, where we can appeal to nobler instincts to do what's best for all Americans and not just those of a particular partisan persuasion.
Go ahead, respond to that, Senator.
Well, that speech was intended to rebuke me, and it was widely seen as that. You know, my response, I got up and spoke directly after Orrin did, and I praised his speech. I said, I actually agree with you that this needs to be a body that respects decorum and civility. And in my every communication, I have respected decorum and civility, but telling the truth is entirely consistent with the very best traditions of the United States Senate. That not engaging in deception, that's what the Senate should be doing. And frankly, a lot of the career politicians in Washington would rather you insult them personally, would rather you vilify them personally, than actually tell the truth about the fact that the Republican majority leader and Democratic majority leader are joined at the hip fighting for the exact same policies, which is more and more spending and debt and power in Washington. I mean, it was stunning, for example, Howie. We've all seen these horrifying videos from Planned Parenthood.
Right.
Of senior officials of Planned Parenthood bargaining over the sale of the body parts of unborn children. It appears that they're admitting to multiple felonies on video. Now, I introduced an amendment, a very simple amendment, that would defund Planned Parenthood, especially during the pendency of criminal investigations. Mike Lee introduced an amendment like that. We tried to bring it up, and it was Republican leadership who blocked it. That is...
I know you guys don't have the votes, but could you and Lee and a handful of others make a motion to vacate the majority leader's chair, or is there anything in the Senate rules that would allow that? And if you're really angry, I mean, isn't that a step you should take?
Well, you know, it's not a question of anger. My focus consistently is on listening to the people who elected me, and I'm going to continue to tell the truth and stand up and do what I said I would do. But truth has power, shining a light. There is a reason why so many career politicians are scurrying out to smack me right now, because they really do not like the American people realizing just how in cahoots Republican leadership is with Democratic leadership. But it's the reason so many of us are frustrated, that we win elections and it doesn't seem anything changes. And here's the problem. It's not that leadership is incompetent. It's not that leadership is unwilling to fight. They will fight, and they fight very effectively, for corporate welfare, for cronyism, for growing big government. They're very effective, ferocious fighters, for example, for the Export-Import Bank.
Right.
But they're
As we've
unwilling
seen.
to fight to stop Obamacare. They're unwilling to fight to stop sanctuary cities. They're unwilling to fight to defund Planned Parenthood. They're unwilling to fight for any of the priorities of real, live conservatives who we're the ones who elected them.
Senator,
And
I have to.
that's the disconnect.
I have to stop you there. We appreciate you being with us, and you're welcome to come on anytime. And what's your web address if people want to get involved?
It is tedcruz.org, tedcruz.org. Please come, contribute, sign up, volunteer, tedcruz.org. It's incredible the energy we're seeing.
Okay, when are you going to be in New Hampshire next?
I don't have the date in front of me, but it will be
soon.
soon. We're going to spend a lot of time in New Hampshire.
Thanks a lot, Senator Cruz.
Thank you. God bless you.